and I saw all these similarities in the trajectory of their lives. From there was life before Epstein, and then there was life after Epstein. And almost across the board, these girls, even if they went there only one time, they were deeply scarred by what had happened.
Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
Good night, and good luck.
Hey folks, welcome back once again to the Lincoln Project Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rick Wilson. I'm delighted to be joined today by Julie K. Brown. Julie Brown is a remarkable reporter with the Miami Herald, and she has covered the Jeffrey Epstein story earlier and better than almost anyone else out there. Julie wrote the definitive series about Epstein during his 2019 arrest and trial. And Julie, this has suddenly come back into the world as something that is in the center of political and media attention everywhere with everyone. Talk to us about your knowledge and experience of this story going way back. And in particular, what I'm struck by is suddenly people, and you've covered this in the past, but suddenly people are noticing that there were victims in this, not just Trump, Epstein, and Maxwell, or a few small characters around it, but there were a lot of young women, young girls who were sexually and personally abused. Talk to us about your reporting on this story from the very beginning.
Well, I had, it was the election. Donald Trump was running, and there was a civil lawsuit that had been filed against him and Jeffrey Epstein by a woman who alleged that she had been raped at their hands. And it wasn't getting a lot of attention. It was late in 2016, so it was almost the time. I actually read a column by someone, lawyer, who said, why isn't the media looking at this? So, of course, I thought, well, let me take a look at this. Now,
Hold my beer.
yeah. Now, remember, I didn't discover the Jeffrey Epstein story. It had been in the news, years
Sure.
and years before, when he was under investigation by Palm Beach police and ended up getting this sweetheart deal. And that had all been reported before.
Right.
But it didn't sit, the whole thing didn't sit well with me. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I should take another go at this and see if I can find something maybe that another reporter wasn't able to find. And at the time, like I said, this lawsuit just kind of put the idea in my head, and also, made it somewhat timely that a woman was accusing Trump. And by the way, he was also scheduled to give a deposition in that case. And here he was running for president of the United States. So the lawsuit ended up going away right before the election, which made me even more suspicious that maybe I better take a look at it. And then by the time I was starting to dig into these files, I always sort of describe it like I was taking a cold case, because there was a lot of material, and there was also a lot of new material, quite frankly. So as I was looking at it, Trump nominated Alexander Acosta to be his labor secretary. Now, Acosta, I knew, was the prosecutor who gave Jeffrey Epstein the sweetheart deal. So, you already see all these little strings and threads that I'm sort of thinking, this is very strange. And so I went to my boss and I said, look, I wonder what the victims have to say about this. This is the prosecutor who basically let their predator off the hook, and he is now nominated for a huge agency that has oversight of human trafficking. So I just started trying to get together who the victims were, which was a job in and of itself, because they were minors when this happened, so none of their names were in public documents. So it took me many months to figure out who these women, now women, they were girls, and
right.
This happened, were. And that's how it started. I just started calling the victims, and I had a lot of people that didn't want to talk. Some of them, didn't ever tell anyone that they were sexually abused.
Right.
And they had married and gone on with their lives. And, so it was understandable. They didn't want to go public, but I managed to get several women to talk to me, not only talk to me on the record, but also to let us film them discussing what had happened to them and how they felt betrayed.
You mentioned, I mean, this is one of the things that I continue to find horrifying and fascinating about this case is a lot of Trump's supporters and allies and fans are very much in this sort of, we're protecting the children. Trump is going to protect the children. And Epstein was a guy who was engaged in the systematic abuse of minors. And Ghislaine Maxwell, from everybody's reporting, yours and sort of the broader knowledge and her case, was the facilitator of this, was the engineer of the recruiting of a lot of these young girls.
She was the predator too. She was a predator
Yes.
too.
I was actually about to ask you that question, but what you knew about Maxwell from this is that she was equally culpable in the direct sexual abuse of these young girls.
Yes, and for these women, in some ways, she's even worse than Epstein. They have said this publicly, that she was even worse because she was the one that went and used her little magic, acting like she was friends with them, this nice British lady who would go into these gyms and these spas around Palm Beach, Florida, and track down these beautiful girls, give them her business card and say, I have a very wealthy man and he wants a traveling masseuse and you'll travel the world, or he will help you if you work for him. He will help you get into the modeling. You're so beautiful. You could be a model. It was all this, song and dance, and they trusted her. She seemed like they were safe. Oh, it can't be that bad. Look at this nice lady. So she entrapped them.
That as my friend Stuart Stevens calls it, she was glamorous and she had that sort of pixie dust of England and royalty around her. And, oh, I know princes, I know billionaires, I know. And so these girls, a lot of whom, a lot of the Palm Beach girls are, and you and I will speak, not everybody will understand this reference, but a lot of those girls are from west of the interstate.
Right.
And they are not sophisticated young ladies. They are not, they were not worldly in particular ways.
Well, they came from vulnerable backgrounds, a lot of them. They were in foster care, or their parents worked around the clock. Virginia Giuffre, who was the most vocal of all those, she was sexually abused from the time she was 8 years old. He preyed on women that, as one victim told me for my series, which I'll never forget, and actually I feel chills just thinking about it. He preyed on women, or I'm sorry, he preyed on girls that he thought no one would believe, and he was right. Because that's exactly what happened. They didn't believe the girls, and they let him basically off the hook.
So he had not been unreported before this big swoop in on him. There had been complaints about Jeffrey Epstein prior to the things that brought down the state around his ears. He was a known sort of scuzzy quantity in that Palm Beach social world.
Right.
I've told this story a couple of times. I used to do a lot of business with some very high net worth developer types down there. And even in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was like, oh yeah, Epstein is he's a weird guy. He's a creepy guy. He's, a lot of strange shit about that guy. And it wasn't, and these weren't people in his circle, but they were in that sort of broader Palm Beach gossipy. And folks, if you think for a moment about Palm Beach, in the pre-internet era, it was a place where people over drinks at Bath and Tennis or at the Breakers or anywhere else were always, everybody knew who was sleeping with who. Everybody knew who had what everybody's habits were. And so he was sort of a known quantity even before the arrest. So I want to ask you a question about Alex Acosta, because he was the red flag in a lot of ways that a number of people suddenly were like, why is Trump putting this guy in as labor secretary? He came out of essentially nowhere. Talk to me about how Alex Acosta handled that case and about the level to which the sweetheart deal that he gave Epstein for work release and house arrest was extraordinarily lenient compared to what he had been accused of and found, and that the court had said he was guilty of.
Well, Alex Acosta was actually a rising star in the Republican Party when this case landed on his desk. He had been part of a task force, ironically, that was cracking down on child pornography. And he was having press conferences and press releases saying, "Here's this man," and he got caught up with child pornography on his computer. So he was really actively going after people who were not only producing child porn, but just looking at it even. And so when this landed on his desk, this was a man who, he soon found out was very connected. One of the first things Epstein did was hire lawyer Alan Dershowitz. And then the next lawyer, was Jay Lefkowitz, who was one of the lawyers with Kirkland and Ellis, which has a lot of say in who gets nominated for the Supreme Court. Epstein was so adept at finding out each person's, I don't know if you want to call it their soft spot or what it was. Like, for one of the civil lawyers, he happened to find out that the civil lawyer loved these chocolate chip cookies from this specific bakery in New York. And when the lawyer went to meet with Epstein, he had the cookies from that bakery on his desk. So he knew how to manipulate these prosecutors, or he figured out how to manipulate them. And that's what I think he did in a way with Acosta, because he knew Acosta wanted to be a Supreme Court justice. He was very ambitious. So he doesn't want to bend anyone out of shape who works in any kind of a lane that would have prevented him from becoming a Supreme Court justice.
Mhm. So the lawsuit that had been brought against Epstein and Trump that went away during the 2016 campaign, was that settled? Do we know how that disappeared or why that disappeared? Do we know did Epstein settle it? Did Trump settle it? Was there some other maneuver here that I just don't know, that I don't know the backstory to?
Well, all we know is she was represented. I'm trying to remember the name of the lawyer.
Lisa Bloom.
Thank you. Lisa Bloom had announced, we're going to have a press conference with this victim who is going to go public with the allegations against Trump. And I don't know what happened, but it was canceled and that woman disappeared. Now, I've heard everything from, she was probably paid off to she was not credible. She did have a lot of the people that were sort of behind her turned out were political operatives. So that lent an air of a credibility problem to her story. And
Sure.
I was just warned, don't even go there, because the implication was that it wasn't solid. It wasn't a
Got it.
solid story.
Got it. So I want to go to Virginia Giuffre for a moment, because she is obviously committed suicide this spring, was one of the better known victims of Epstein. And now we have Donald Trump this week coming out during a presser and saying, "Oh, Epstein stole her from me."
Mr. President, did one of those stolen, persons, that include Virginia Jeffrey?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah, he stole her.
What were your thoughts when you heard Trump say that, and knowing what you know about Virginia Giuffre and her story?
My first thought was, if Virginia was alive, she would be pounding on the front door of the White House. She would be sitting there until he would talk to her. She did do that with several of the people who enabled Epstein. She knocked right on their door. So my first thought was, this would just infuriate her. And because, she was very forthright and vocal, and it seemed like, anyway, that she was fearless, but obviously she wasn't.
Yeah, I think a lot of that, as you mentioned before, a lot of these girls who did not come from sophisticated or safe or affluent backgrounds and didn't have a lot of had come from abusive backgrounds in many cases, which is not unusual in young girls and young women who get involved in this kind of trafficking stuff, sadly. Um, but Giuffre seemed to actually be one of the most vocal for the longest time. Like, really was, on her story. Clearly, her life had changed rather fundamentally since the time that she had been trafficked by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, and between the time she had worked as a teenage towel girl for Donald Trump. Um, didn't you find it unusual that Trump seemed to be very familiar with exactly who she is, exactly what her job had been? I mean, Donald Trump at the time had thousands of employees spread about his clubs, his golf courses, his condos, his construction company, all these things. He remembered this one girl in this one thing, and Jeffrey Epstein stealing her from him. I that keeps coming back to me as like a throwaway line that's like a weird confession of guilt.
Well, I'm not so sure that all that is true. I don't think that he really knew who she was until probably around 2015 when um that she joined this civil lawsuit that the victims had um filed against the federal government and the FBI. And as part of her allegations, she had named Prince Andrew, et cetera. So the story got some coverage, and he was subpoenaed. Trump was actually, or he was on the list to be called as a witness in this lawsuit. So the lawyers who represented the victims in this lawsuit did reach out to Trump, and so they told him about her. And, the fact that she had worked there, and she's claiming that Maxwell recruited her. So at that point, he did know. So he has known at least since, I want to say, 2015, and maybe even sooner, because the lawyers for these victims were pretty relentless in pursuing a case against not only Epstein but the federal government.
Yeah, and it just, like I said, it struck me because he notoriously does not, he's one of those people who does not care a lot about people that can't do something for him immediately, and it was, I don't know, I just found it curious. Um, so as this story has started to sort of take over Trump's brain, take over where what the White House can even accomplish at any given day of the week, and started to really shape the politics of the moment that we're in. You look back on this and you did, like I said, this groundbreaking reporting on it. What do you think that we're missing right now in the way this story is playing out, both in Trump's head and in Maxwell's head? I think she's desperate to get that either a commutation or a pardon. And I'm just curious, like, what do you think about like, this thing has just exploded again after being sort of a low burn for a long time.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it strikes me that the Justice Department, Bondi, and the other
Patel and
yeah,
Bongino.
they didn't do much homework on this. I mean, it's clear that they didn't think this through. 'Cause this is a mess. This is a real mess. And had they really done their homework, they could have avoided this. There's a million other things they could have said rather than, we're just going to close the book on this. There's a million other things they could have done. So this is mind-boggling in a way. Secondly, at the very least, what they should have done is made some effort to talk to the victims on this. They have completely exorcised them out of this whole equation, which to me is just a huge tragedy, because these women feel like they were betrayed by their government to begin with. So now it's more one betrayal after another betrayal. I mean, especially since Trump had promised, we're going to be transparent, we're going to, do all this, that, and the other thing. And so those are two things. And then the third thing that I think that hasn't been done, it needs to be done, is to follow Epstein's money. Come on. How did he make his money? I mean, it's like this is criminal investigation 101. Do you
Sure.
think that the FBI and the Justice Department didn't look into? I mean, now we know the banks had all kinds of SARS reports on him, 4,700 wire transfers. He made billions and billions of dollars off of Leon Black that we really don't know what the money was for.
And Leon Black has skated out of this thing like pure as the, or well, not, he's not pure, but acting like he's pure as the driven snow.
His own lawyers. I just was at a press conference with Ron Wyden, who is pursuing this angle and
Right.
really hitting a brick wall with the Trump administration. Um, and he said, this is something that, if for no other reason they need to, why didn't the IRS look into this? This is an incredible amount of money, incredible amount of wire transfers. Some of it, Wyden said, was to survivors or victims of Epstein. So it just seems like you just follow the money.
Yeah, and that idea the other day, and I saw this story, and I didn't really run it down. That idea of he made a wire transfer out of some significant amount of money a few days before he killed himself, or his trust did. There are still a number of financial vehicles around Epstein's former financial empire that exist, that have money, that are moving money, and those transactions, as you point out, that to my mind is a massive story, and a massive investigative lead. If they really were looking for people involved with Jeffrey Epstein, you would think they would chase down those 4,700 transactions. You'd think they'd get forensic accountants on the job. You'd think they would get FinCEN experts on the job.
Yeah, it's clear they don't want to go there. I mean, that's been really the failure, and not just in the Trump administration. I mean, this spans several administrations. Even during the Biden administration, Wyden said he was trying to get more documentation on that and couldn't get it. So this isn't, this really isn't a Republican or a Democrat issue. This is a crime. It's a crime against children,
100%.
and it should be investigated thoroughly. And without the who did what did Biden do, we're here now. I mean, let's try to find, some kind of sense of, I don't know what the word is, justice for these women. Now let's look at what happened here.
Yeah, I think Julie, that is the thing that just haunts me about this whole story. I've been it's been the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, of the last 3 weeks we've been all talking about this. In the last 4 or 5 days, I kept wondering, like, of the hundreds of victims of Epstein, very few people, you were one of the few exceptions out there, have gone to school and covered who these girls and women were, and given us a profile of what their lives were like then, and the ones that survived, what their lives are like now. And it strikes me as an injustice piled on an injustice.
Right. I mean, that was, initially I thought I would just get their reaction to Acosta being appointed labor secretary, but I started a spreadsheet once I started compiling who they were, and I saw all these similarities in the trajectory of their lives. From there was life before Epstein, and then there was life after Epstein. And almost across the board, these girls, even if they went there only one time, they were deeply scarred by what had happened. And that, I thought, needed to be exposed, because their voices were never really heard before this time. They really
Right.
hadn't, for obvious reasons. They were very young. But time had passed, and now they were in their late 20s. And they were, one of the victims, she was very reluctant to go public and talk to me. Her lawyer told her not to. And she sat with me for hours, and my reporting partner, Emily Michaud, who did a lot of the photographs and video. And it shook me. The interview
Okay.
shook me. And we were driving home, it was out of Nashville, and we were driving to the airport. I got a call, and it was her, and I thought, oh, she's going to say, forget it, I don't want to go public. And what she said was, thank you. I've been wanting to tell that story forever. And she said, "I can't tell you how it's like a boulder's been lifted off my shoulder," because we were the only people that had asked them, "What happened? What
Right.
went wrong here? Tell me how you were betrayed. You don't have to talk to me about the sexual assault part, but just tell me how the justice system worked for you or didn't work for you."
Or
And
didn't, right.
they had been wanting to speak about that for a very long time.
I wonder. Yes, and you're correct. Alex Acosta was sort of a rising star guy. Not. I still don't think he was big enough to be a cabinet secretary. I still think there's something there. But I wonder if Alex Acosta has ever been asked, if you've ever asked him or anybody's ever asked him, like, did he think he delivered justice in that case? Did he think? Did
Yes,
he?
he was asked about that, and he, had his right-hand prosecutor, the deputy, U.S. attorney, write an op-ed piece after my series ran. He wrote a scathing op-ed piece, which basically was Alex Acosta's answer to this. It basically saying, the evidence was not there. Many of the girls didn't want to testify. I mean, it was just all these litany of things that, I was able to knock down right away because really, a good prosecutor will get a victim to talk. A good prosecutor will figure out how to do that. They didn't. They kind of stopped the FBI investigation in its tracks, I think, when it hit a certain place.
Say more about that. And what place was that?
Well, I think that what they were uncovering was a lot of pushback. I mean, we could see it in the emails. One of the uh, pieces of new information that came out was as a result of this victims' right lawsuit that was filed against the FBI and the federal government by the victims. And in the discovery and in the course of the lawyers, Brad Edwards, who deserves credit for filing this lawsuit and taking it on for 10 years, the lawyers managed to get all these emails that went on between the prosecutors and Epstein's attorneys. And the emails were so enlightening. They were so chummy. They were so like each time the prosecutor said, "We're going after this," Epstein's lawyers came back with a 40-page document saying, "Here's why you can't do this." So then the prosecutors had to respond to the 40-page document. This was constant. It was constant. Like, here's another, they barraging the prosecutors with all this mess of legal lawsuits, citations, and just bogging them down so much. Number one, they lost. I think they got. They were just told this is somebody yeah, they were exhausted, but also at what they were weighing the pros and cons. At what cost am I going after this guy? He knows Clinton, he knows Trump, he knows everybody big. This isn't worth it, and I think that they convinced themselves that these young women were, not to be, they were nothing. They came from the wrong side of the tracks.
Like I said, they're from the wrong side of 95 in the minds of, I think, a lot of these people that have looked at. I think a lot of the it's easy to box those girls as being they're those trashy girls from outside the island. They're these trashy
Right,
girls from across the interstate,
right,
um, and that sure that's where a lot of them came from, but it doesn't mean they weren't human beings. It
right.
doesn't mean they weren't. So they kept getting papered by Epstein's formidable, highly funded legal team, and Acosta just still, he the deal he cut for him still strikes, I think, everyone who looks at it as like extraordinarily lenient.
Well, Acosta didn't create it. Epstein's
Right.
lawyer created the
Yeah.
whole deal,
Right.
and it was, Acosta would come back and say, "Well, we can't." There's emails and letters that were going back and forth that we have where Acosta, for example, was initially saying, "We're going to charge you with this, this, and that," And then they would come back and say, "Oh no, you don't have any grounds for this or this or this." And then he would keep backing down. That's basically what happened. He backed down, he backed down, he backed down until there was really nothing. They were
Right.
going to give him this deal. And even then, Epstein took that all the way to Washington. That's when he hired Ken Starr, and Ken Starr was writing letters to the Justice Department in Washington because he wanted to get Epstein completely off.
Right.
And then they managed to just get this deal where he had to go to jail, sort of, for 13 months.
Yeah, and then work release, which I found, because I had read somewhere that during the work release, he was still getting massages from these girls in his
Yes.
office
Yes.
at his work release office.
Yeah.
Which is
After his arrest, some of those women came forward and said they went to visit him in his office, and he was having sex with them. While the deputies, the sheriff's deputies who he hired as his personal, it was just such a conflict. He hired these Palm Beach sheriff's deputies who were supposed to, I guess, make sure he wasn't doing this kind of thing. But because he was paying them privately so much money, they looked the other way.
I think the thing about Epstein, there's a cautionary tale about monstrous people here, that that there are monstrous people in every socioeconomic status in this country and in the world, but he is a particular combination of money, sociopathy, evil, and just whatever drove him mentally to be this way. It's so strange how it drew all these other people into the same orbit, these famous people into the same orbit, and he's that monster. But I want to go back because that monster couldn't have existed again without Maxwell. And the idea now that Maxwell would get a federal pardon, what are your thoughts on that whole thing? Because I mean, I find it, set aside all the politics of it, I find it so profoundly offensive to the victims and to justice, that the thought that this woman would get a presidential pardon and get out of jail.
Well, it's like the Sweetheart Deal Part 2, right? It's just a continuation of what happened to start with. I mean, everything is repeating itself in some ways. It's it's not even that they, legitimately, I could see how they would want to go to talk to her, okay?
Mhm.
But, you know, I cover crime a lot. I've covered the
Right.
criminal justice system. And to send your second in command of the U.S. Department of Justice to do
Right.
this kind of questioning when there's no way he could have known, for example, all the things that Maxwell said in her prior depositions that,
Right.
by the way, led to her being charged with perjury. So
Twice, right?
but
Is it,
it could have been 2 charges because she gave
okay. Okay.
at least 2 depositions.
One's enough, but yeah.
So she lied throughout the whole thing. And so, you can't point to things that she's telling you if you're interviewing her that are inconsistent if you don't know the history of the case. And it's hard for me to believe that he could have known the history of the case that well. Because there are very few people that do know the case that well.
Right.
And so it's bizarre that you would, it's almost like was the same kind of show that Bondi was putting out when she released those binders,
Mhm.
full of nothing,
Right, with
so.
a few publicly available records
Right,
in the
right,
in
which
the
I could see
binders.
coming. I could see that train wreck coming before it even happened, because I
This
knew from what she was saying, there is no way that she's gonna be releasing anything.
Right, yeah, when they put that out, I believe they would probably issue, like, one more tranche of things that were more obscure but still publicly available records, and say, "Well, that's it. That's all we can do because the rest is CSAM material or victim material, and that's that. It's all over. By the way, Bill Clinton's a bad guy, and he went to the island," or whatever. I mean, to my mind, that has to be the quid pro quo, though. I mean, Blanche is there, maybe as deputy attorney general, but he is also the one person that Trump now trusts in the legal side as his former personal attorney, and and knowing what you know about Ghislaine Maxwell, I mean, I think it's obvious she would say whatever it took to get out of jail.
Well,
She would
would
say
you?
anything.
I mean,
Of
she's
course.
what does she have to lose? I mean, she's in
You're in
there
a 20-year
already.
20-year hitch in the Tallahassee Federal Women's Correctional Institution?
Yeah,
Hell yeah, I'd want to
and
get out of
she's
there.
60, 3 or something like that. So, it's essentially a life sentence. And, so she's going to do, and she's still spending money on lawyers with this appeal. She's got an appeal pending before the U.S. Supreme Court.
Right.
So, she's going to do whatever it takes. And her family is also behind her. And I don't know. She does know everything.
This is true. She is the Rosetta Stone to all this stuff, right? I mean, she
She is.
could lay down names, dates, times, people.
She does.
Yeah.
She knows.
Uh,
She does know everything. But the victims would argue they don't need those other people that bad. They still would not want to see her get a pardon. They don't care if the other men or people involved never see never get
Right.
arrested. They think she's really the top of the organization, so to speak.
Yeah, she was clearly always the sort of consigliere to this entire
Right.
trafficking ring and this entire pedophile ring, because we have to call it what it was. These are young girls, and Julie, I want to just thank you for the reporting you have done on this. And folks, if you have not gone back and read Julie's original series on Epstein, the Miami Herald, go read it. If you have not read her book about Epstein, go read it. It is a fascinating look into this horrifying story. And she's one of the best reporters out there. And Julie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Is there anywhere that folks should find you on social media or
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I haven't made the transition. It's too time consuming to go on, 5 different platforms, as you know. So I'm
Yes.
just on Twitter at JKB Journalist.
JKB Journalist, right? All right. Well, Julie, thank you again so much for coming on the Lincoln Project podcast today. And again, we appreciate all that you've done in covering this incredibly consequential story. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.